The white roses downstairs had no card, but the message lighting up my phone screen spoke volumes. It was just a photograph. My husband, currently sleeping soundly beside me, was kissing a stranger in a hotel lobby. He had called the flowers a mistake earlier today. I looked at the timestamp, 7:45. I did not scream or cry. I simply hit save. He thought he was safe in the dark, but I was finally seeing everything clearly. My name is Jenna Marlowe. At 34 years old, I had built a career at Westridge Dynamics on a single, unshakable principle. I predicted disasters before they happened. I was a risk analyst. My job was to look at a pristine set of data, find the one fracturing variable, and calculate exactly when the collapse would occur. It was ironic, then, that I missed the fault line running directly through my own living room until the earth was already shaking. It started on a Tuesday morning in Northbridge Creek. The sunlight hit the quartz countertops of our kitchen with that specific, aggressive brightness that real estate agents always promised. I was drinking black coffee, mentally preparing for a board meeting about third-quarter projections, while the silence of the house felt luxurious. It was the kind of quiet that cost a lot of money to maintain. Andrew was still upstairs, likely tying his tie with that practiced precision that made him one of the most sought-after financial lawyers in the state. The doorbell cut through the calm like a knife. I opened the heavy oak door to find a courier holding a massive arrangement of white roses. They were lush, expensive, and suffocatingly perfect. I signed for them, assuming Andrew was being romantic for no reason, which was a statistical anomaly in itself lately. I set the heavy vase on the kitchen island and searched the stems for a card. There was nothing. No envelope, no note, no name. Footsteps clicked against the hardwood behind me. Andrew walked in, adjusting his cufflinks, looking every inch the devoted husband I had married 5 years ago. "Beautiful," he said, reaching for the coffee pot. "Client sent them, I assumed you did," I said, running a finger over a velvet petal. "There's no card." Andrew froze. It was a micro-reaction, a hesitation that lasted less than a second, but I saw it. His hand paused mid-air before gripping the handle of the carafe. He looked at the flowers, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine panic flicker behind his polished veneer. He blinked it away instantly, but the data point had been logged. "Me?" He laughed, but the sound was thin, lacking its usual resonance. "No, I didn't send those. Must be a mistake. The florist probably got the address wrong." He did not look at me. He looked at his watch. "I'm running late," he muttered, taking a quick sip of coffee and grabbing his briefcase. "Don't worry about it, Jenna. Just throw them out if they bother you." He kissed my cheek, but his lips felt dry, perfunctory. Then he was gone, the front door closing with a solid thud. I stood alone in the kitchen. The silence that had felt luxurious 10 minutes ago now felt heavy, charged with static. A cold sensation, distinct and sharp, crawled up my spine. It was the instinct I relied on to save Westridge Dynamics millions of dollars every year. My brain began to race, categorizing the variables, the lack of a card, the specific shade of white roses, the terror in Andrew's eyes when he realized he had not sent them. He had said it was a mistake, but Andrew Marlowe did not make mistakes, and he certainly did not stutter unless he was lying. I went to work. I sat through meetings. I nodded at the right times. I projected the image of the composed, capable Jenna Marlowe. But beneath the surface, a new algorithm was running, processing the anomaly of the morning. That evening, the house was dark. Andrew was allegedly working late on a merger, a common enough excuse that I had never questioned before. The roses still sat on the island, ghost white in the moonlight filtering through the blinds. They looked less like a gift and more like a funeral arrangement. I pulled out my phone. I wanted to capture the image, perhaps to reverse search the unique arrangement, or maybe just to document the moment my reality began to tilt. I framed the shot. Just as my thumb hovered over the shutter button, A notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. No words, just an attachment. I tapped it. The image filled my screen, bright and high definition. It was time-stamped from 20 minutes ago. The background was the dimly lit lobby of a boutique hotel I vaguely recognized. In the center of the frame was Andrew. His hand was resting possessively on the lower back of a woman with cascading dark hair. Her face was turned away, but his was clear. He was leaning in, his eyes closed, his mouth pressed against hers with a hunger he had not shown me in 2 years. The phone did not shake in my hand. My breathing did not hitch. I stared at the pixels, analyzing the evidence with the cold detachment of a coroner examining a body. Andrew had said the flowers were a mistake. He was wrong. The flowers were a message. I did not scream. I did not throw the vase against the wall. I did not call him to demand an explanation. Instead, I pressed my finger to the screen and selected Save to Photos. If they wanted to play a game, they had severely underestimated their opponent. I turned off the screen, plunging the room back into darkness. I grew up in a house built on glass floors and high expectations. My parents did not raise a daughter, they curated a project. In the Marlowe household, emotions were considered inefficiencies, messy spills that needed to be wiped up before they stained the carpet. I became the fixer before I even knew how to ride a bicycle. If my mother had a migraine, I dimmed the lights and silenced the world. If my father lost a client, I presented him with perfect report cards as a distraction. I learned very quickly that being good meant being silent, and being loved meant being useful. I swallowed my anger until it calcified into something hard and heavy in the pit of my stomach, a stone I carried around for 3 decades. That was why Andrew had dazzled me so completely when we first met. He was the antithesis of the cold, transactional affection I was used to. He was warm, attentive, and painfully polite. He anticipated my needs before I even voiced them. I remembered a rainy Tuesday 5 years ago, standing under the awning of a coffee shop, shivering. He had wrapped his coat around me, pulling me close until the smell of his cedarwood cologne filled my lungs. "You don't have to carry everything alone, Jenna," he had whispered, brushing a wet strand of hair from my face. Let me take care of you for once." I believed him. For the first time in my life, I exhaled. I thought I had finally found a safe harbor where I did not have to be the captain, the navigator, and the mechanic all at once. I thought I was being loved, but the erosion was slow, subtle enough that a risk analyst like me missed the early warning signs. Over the last 2 years, the man who once held my coat began to look through me as if I were made of cellophane. The dinners became silent. The intimacy became scheduled, then sporadic, then non-existent. He started coming home late, smelling of stale office air and secrets. "I'm just swamped with the merger," he would say, turning his back to me in bed. "Don't start with the questions. Jenna, I'm too tired to deal with your insecurities tonight." I retreated. I did what I was trained to do. I blamed myself. I told myself I was too focused on my career at Westridge Dynamics. I convinced myself that if I were softer, warmer, less analytical, he would come back to me. I spent nights awake in our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a loneliness so profound it felt like physical pressure on my chest. I was surrounded by luxury, yet I was starving. The white roses downstairs were the first crack in the dam I had built to hold back the truth. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone heavy in my hand. The image of him kissing another woman burned in my mind, but it was not just the photo. It was the sudden, blinding clarity of hindsight. I thought about the times he took phone calls in the driveway, claiming poor reception in the house. I remembered the second credit card statement I had glimpsed on the counter 6 months ago, the one he snatched away claiming it was for client expenses. I remembered the way he flinched when I touched his shoulder last week. I had categorized these data points as anomalies. I had ignored the pattern because the conclusion was too painful to accept. But I could not ignore a bouquet of flowers with no sender and a photograph that proved my life was a lie. The sadness began to recede, replaced by a familiar, cold precision. The stone in my stomach was no longer a burden. It was a weapon. I had spent my entire life suppressing my rage to keep the peace, to keep everyone else comfortable. I had twisted myself into knots to be the perfect wife, just as I had been the perfect daughter. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The woman staring back was pale, but her eyes were dry. "You think I'm stupid, Andrew," I whispered to the empty room, my voice low and steady. "You think I'm just some scenery in your life." I touched the cold glass of the mirror. "If you want to treat me like an option," I said, the words tasting like iron on my tongue, "I will show you exactly why I am a necessity. I am done fixing things. It is time to break them." I did not sleep. I dissected. By 2 a.m, the initial shock of the photograph had cooled into a rigid, clinical focus. I sat at the dining room table with my laptop open, the screen's blue light cutting through the dark. I was no longer a wife looking at her husband's betrayal. I was a senior risk analyst looking at a dataset that did not add up. I imported the photo into my image processing software, the same program I used to analyze structural integrity in disaster models. I adjusted the contrast and exposure. The metadata had been scrubbed, which was smart, but the sender had been careless with the reflection. In the high-gloss finish of the brass revolving door behind Andrew and the woman, there was a distorted view of the valet stand. I zoomed in until the pixels began to fracture. There it was, a partial license plate on a black sedan. It was not Andrew's Audi. It was a luxury rental model, the kind used by corporate concierge services. I picked up my phone and dialed Riley Monroe. Riley was a relic from my brief, rebellious phase in college, now a terrifyingly competent IT technician for a private security firm. She picked up on the second ring, her voice raspy with sleep, but instantly alert. "Jenna, it is 2 a.m. Is everything okay? I need a favor," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, devoid of any tremor. "I am sending you a photo. I need you to run a partial plate and cross-reference the architecture in the background. I need a location." "Okay." Riley hesitated, the sound of keyboard clacking filling the silence. "You sound intense. Is this about Andrew?" "Just find it." "Riley." 5 minutes later, my inbox pinged. "It is the St. Regis in Arden Valley," Riley said, her voice dropping an octave. "Boutique, discreet, very expensive, and the car is registered to a shell company used by high-end transport services. Jenna, listen to me. I ran a quick search on the number that texted you. It is a burner, routed through 3 different servers. Whoever sent this, they wanted you to see it, but they didn't want to be found." I stared at the screen. Arden Valley was 40 minutes away. Andrew had told me he was in a deposition downtown all day. "Jenna," Riley continued, the concern palpable in her tone. "If you go down this road, if you start digging into this, there is no turning back. You might find things you can't unsee." "I'm already looking at them," I replied quietly. "Thanks, Riley." I hung up and turned my attention to the finances. Andrew was meticulous. He was a financial lawyer. He knew how to hide assets better than anyone. His primary accounts were spotless. The mortgage, the utilities, the country club fees. Everything was automated and transparent. It was too perfect. It was a curated reality designed to withstand a cursory glance. But I was not giving it a cursory glance. I dug deeper, accessing the digital archives of our joint credit lines. I found it in the archived statements of a supplementary card he claimed he rarely used, the one reserved for emergency travel expenses. There were charges, small ones at first, then larger sums. $200 here, $500 there. Then, last month, a transfer of $3,000. The recipient was listed as Everland Consulting. I frowned. I knew every major vendor Andrew worked with. I knew the names of the partners, the clerks, even the interns. Everland Consulting was a ghost. I ran a quick search on the corporate registry. No website. No physical headquarters, just a box in a tax-friendly district in Delaware. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, not from heartbreak, but from fear. This was not just a hotel room charge for a mistress. These were structured payments to a shell entity. "What are you doing, Andrew?" I whispered to the empty room. Affairs were messy, emotional disasters. But money laundering embezzlement, that was a prison sentence. That was the kind of risk that destroyed not just marriages, but lives. I closed the laptop slowly. The urge to storm upstairs and shake him awake was violent, but I strangled it. Confrontation now would give him a chance to spin a narrative, to hide the evidence, to gaslight me into believing I was crazy. He was a lawyer. He argued for a living. I could not win a debate against him, but I could win a war. I needed more than a picture and a credit card statement. I needed the whole story. I needed to know exactly what Everland Consulting was, and I needed to know who the woman in the photo was. Was she just a lover, or was she part of the ledger? I stood up and walked to the window, watching the streetlights flicker on the empty road. "You want to play games," I murmured, my reflection in the glass looking harder, sharper than I remembered. "Fine. Let's play." The drive to Arden Valley took 45 minutes. I spent the entire time rehearsing my lines, stripping the emotion from my voice until I sounded exactly like the corporate shark I was paid to be. The St. Regis was imposing, a fortress of stone and glass nestled against the hills. I walked into the lobby, the heels of my pumps clicking a sharp rhythm on the polished marble floors. I approached the front desk. The concierge was young, with a name tag that read, David. He smiled the practiced smile of the service industry. "How may I assist you today?" "Ma'am," I did not smile back. I slid my Westridge Dynamics business card across the counter, placing it deliberately in his line of sight. "I am Jenna Marlowe, Senior Risk Analyst for Westridge Dynamics," I said, my voice clipped and professional. "I am conducting an internal compliance audit regarding expense irregularities linked to a corporate retreat booked at this facility." The booking was under the name Andrew Marlowe. David blinked, his smile faltering. He looked down at the card, then back at me. I'm afraid I can't release guest information without a warrant or the guest's consent. It's policy." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper that suggested I was trying to save him, not threaten him. "David, these irregularities are being flagged by our legal department. If I have to involve external counsel to subpoena these records, your name will be the first one mentioned in the obstruction complaint. I just need to verify the dates and the billing entity. That is all." He swallowed hard. He typed something into his terminal, his eyes darting nervously. "Marlowe," he muttered. "Okay, I have a booking here." He turned the screen slightly. I memorized the information instantly. "Thank you," I said. But the data was wrong. The photograph on my phone was time-stamped yesterday. The booking on the screen was from November 14th, nearly 5 months ago. This is the only stay I asked. "Yes, ma'am. One night, November 14th. I scanned the details. The room type was listed as a corporate retreat suite, a package designed for small executive teams. But under the column for number of guests, there was a single-digit one. Andrew had booked a suite meant for meetings, charged it as a business expense, and stayed there alone. Or so the record claimed. I thanked David and walked out, my mind racing. Why would he meet a woman yesterday in a hotel where he hadn't stayed in months? Unless the meeting yesterday wasn't about sex. Unless the meeting yesterday was the handover. I sat in my car and pulled up the photos I had taken of the screen. The billing address for the November stay wasn't our home. And it wasn't his law firm. It was billed to Everland Consulting. I called Riley immediately. I need you to dig deeper into Everland, I said the moment she picked up. Andrew billed a hotel stay to them 5 months ago. It is listed as a corporate retreat. I'm already on it. Jenna, Riley said, her voice tight. I've been running deeper traces since you called last night. You need to pull over if you are driving. I am parked. Tell me. Everland Consulting doesn't exist, Riley said. I mean, it exists on paper, but there is no office, no employees, no product. It is a shell. But here is the scary part. I found a link between Everland's registration agent and a holding company in the Caymans that was flagged last year for moving illicit funds. Small scale, mostly trying to wash cash for unregistered businesses. I felt the blood drain from my face. Wash cash, I repeated. Riley, are you telling me Andrew is laundering money? I don't know for sure, Riley stammered. But it looks like he is moving money through Everland to hide it. If he is doing this using his credentials as a lawyer, and if he is using joint accounts or cards with your name on them as pass-throughs? She trailed off, but she didn't have to finish the sentence. I knew the law. If Andrew was moving dirty money and I was a beneficiary on the accounts or insurance policies involved, I was not just a betrayed wife. I was an accessory. He is going to get us both arrested, I whispered. Jenna, you need to go to the police, Riley said. No, I said, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Not yet. If I go now, they freeze everything, my assets, my reputation, my career at Westridge. I will be the wife of the criminal lawyer. I will lose everything I have built. I looked at the hotel one last time. This was no longer about a mistress. The woman in the photo, the white roses, the secrecy, it was all part of a much larger, darker machine. Andrew wasn't just breaking my heart, he was building a cage, and he was planning to lock me inside it with his debts and his crimes. I need more proof, I said, starting the engine. I need to know exactly how deep this goes before I burn it down. The air inside the bank vault was recycled and cold, smelling of dust and old money. I sat in the small, private viewing room, the metal box resting on the table like a lead weight. My hands were steady as I turned the key. I had told the bank manager I needed to retrieve my passport for an upcoming business trip. It was a lie. Of course. I was looking for the truth Andrew had buried under layers of steel and security. Inside the box, underneath our marriage license and the deeds to the house, was a thick manila envelope. It was not labeled. I slid the contents out. My breath caught in my throat. It was a paper trail of corruption. There were printouts of wire transfers, complex routing numbers, and receipts, all stamped with the name Everland Consulting. He had been moving significant amounts of money, $50,000 here, $20,000 there for over 18 months. But it was the document at the bottom of the stack that made the room spin. It was a life insurance policy. I scanned the pages, my eyes darting over the legal jargon. It was a term life policy on me, with a double indemnity clause for accidental death. The beneficiary was Andrew. I looked at the effective date of the latest amendment. He had increased the coverage to $3 million just 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. That was around the time he started asking if I was taking my anxiety medication regularly. That was when he started suggesting I looked tired and should take a solo trip to the coast. I flipped the page and found a small, yellow sticky note attached to the back of the policy. It was Andrew's handwriting, the sharp, angular script I used to find attractive. There were 3 bullet points. The first 2 were dates of transfers. The third line made my blood turn to ice. Spouse no longer cooperating. Timeline accelerated. I stared at the words until they blurred. Spouse no longer cooperating. He did not see me as a wife. He did not even see me as a human being. I was an asset that had become a liability. He wasn't just planning to divorce me and run off with the woman from the hotel. He was weighing the cost of a divorce settlement against the payout of a tragic accident. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I could not take the originals. He would know I had been there. I took photos of every page, my phone set to silent, then locked the box and walked out of the bank. My drive home was a blur of calculated paranoia. I checked the rearview mirror every few seconds, looking for the black sedan from the photo. When I got to the house, it felt like walking into a trap. Every shadow looked like a threat. I called Riley from the walk-in closet, the door locked behind me. He increased my life insurance. Riley, I whispered, my hand trembling as I held the phone. 3 weeks ago, he wrote a note saying I was no longer cooperating. Oh my God, Riley breathed, the sound sharp and terrified. Jenna, you need to leave. Right now. Grab a bag and get out of there. We are going to the police precinct. This isn't fraud anymore. This is conspiracy to commit murder. No, I said. The trembling in my hand stopped. What do you mean? No. Riley's voice rose to a panic. He is dangerous. You can't stay in that house with him. If I go to the police now, what do I have? I asked, my voice dropping to a low, flat tone. Pictures of documents. He will claim they are drafts, or that I forged them. He is a lawyer. Riley. He knows how to manipulate the system. He will freeze my assets. He will paint me as the hysterical, jealous wife. I won't let him win. Jenna, please. I need to be the one who ends this. I interrupted her. I need to make sure that when he falls, he never gets up again. That afternoon, I became a ghost in my own home. I installed 3 pinhole cameras that Riley had overnighted to me weeks ago for a different project, one in the study, one in the living room, and one pointed at the front door. I backed up my entire laptop to a cloud server Andrew couldn't access. I changed the passcode on my phone. When I heard the garage door open at 7 in the evening, I was sitting on the sofa, a glass of wine in my hand. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but I forced my face into a mask of exhaustion. Andrew walked in, loosening his tie. He looked at me, his eyes scanning my face for any sign that I knew. Rough day, he asked, heading for the liquor cabinet. Just tired, I said, taking a sip of wine. Work is killing me. He chuckled, the sound devoid of warmth. Don't work too hard, darling. We wouldn't want anything to happen to you. I smiled at him over the rim of my glass. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Don't worry. Andrew, I said softy. I plan on being around for a very long time. Maya Sterling was not what I expected. She looked more like a fashion editor than a divorce lawyer, dressed in a sharp crimson suit that probably cost more than my first car. We met in the back of a dimly lit jazz bar, far away from the circles Andrew and I moved in. I laid the photos of the bank documents on the table between us. Maya picked them up, her manicured nails tapping against the glossy paper. You have enough here for a fault-based divorce, Maya said, her voice smoky and direct. Adultery, financial dissipation. I can get you a good settlement. Jenna, you could walk away with the house and half the liquid assets. I don't want half, I said, my voice steady. And I don't want a settlement. He is planning to kill me. Maya. Or at least, he is betting on my death. Maya stopped tapping. She looked at me, her eyes sharpening into flint. Then we don't file, she said softly. If you file now, he goes into defense mode. He hides the money, he destroys the evidence, and he scrubs the trail. If you want to bury him, you need to let him dig the hole a little deeper. You need access to his digital life, not just paper trails. That night, I became a spy in my own bedroom. Andrew was asleep, his breathing heavy and rhythmic. I slipped out of bed and crept into his home office. Riley had sent me a specialized USB drive, a military-grade cloning tool used by forensic accountants. My hands were sweating as I opened his laptop. I plugged the drive in. A small command window popped up on the screen. Copying 12% complete. The progress bar moved with agonizing slowness. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. I stared at the door. ready to snap the laptop shut at the first sign of movement. 85% complete. Andrew shifted in the bedroom next door. The bed springs groaned. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Silence returned. Download complete. I pulled the drive out and vanished back into the shadows. The next morning, safely inside my locked office at Westridge Dynamics, I decrypted the files. Riley's software tore through Andrew's passwords like they were tissue paper. I found a hidden folder labeled Case Notes, but inside were not legal briefs. They were emails, hundreds of them. They were encrypted, but the cloning tool had grabbed the cached keys. I opened the most recent thread. It was a correspondence with a user simply identified as G. She is asking questions. Andrew had written 2 days ago. I caught her looking at the credit card statement. We need to accelerate. The reply from G sent a wave of nausea rolling through my stomach. The accounts are ready. Once she is out of the picture, the transfer will look like an insurance payout settlement. Do not lose your nerve. Andrew, we are at the finish line. Out of the picture, it was not a metaphor. It was a timeline. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. This was real. The woman in the photo, Grace, perhaps was not just a mistress. She was the architect. When I got home that evening, the atmosphere in the house was suffocating. Andrew was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a little too much force. He stopped when I walked in. You're late, he said, not looking up. Traffic. I lied smoothly. He wiped his hands on a towel and turned to me. His eyes scanned my face, searching for something fear, guilt, knowledge. He walked over to where I had set my purse and casually picked up my phone. My battery is dead, he said, his voice light but his eyes hard. Mind if I check the score of the game on yours? It was a test. He wanted to see if I would panic. He wanted to see if I was hiding anything. I did not flinch. Riley had installed a mirrored interface on my phone that morning. If anyone but me unlocked it, they would see a perfectly normal, boring phone. No hidden photos, no encrypted messages to Riley, no call logs to Maya Sterling. Go ahead, I said, walking past him to the refrigerator. Passcode is the same as always. He unlocked it. I poured myself a glass of water, my back to him, listening to him tap through my apps. He would find nothing but recipes, work emails, and a few texts to my mother. After a minute, he set the phone down on the counter. The tension in his shoulders dropped. He had confirmed I was still the oblivious, compliant wife. Thanks, he said. Giants are losing anyway. I turned around and looked at the man who was plotting my death. I thought about the knife block behind him. I thought about the insurance policy. Then, I forced the corners of my lips upward. That's a shame, I said softly. Maybe their luck will turn around soon. He smiled back, arrogant and relieved. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him was no longer his victim. I was the evidence that would put him away for life. The text message I sent Andrew said I was going to bed early with a migraine. In reality, I was 3 car lengths behind his Audi, merging onto the highway that led toward the glittering skyline of Dunhaven City. My headlights were off. My heart was a cold stone in my chest, and the rental car I had picked up 2 hours ago blended perfectly into the stream of evening traffic. He pulled up to the Sterling, a steakhouse known for its dim lighting and $400 wine bottles. It was the kind of place people went to be seen by the right people, or to hide from the wrong ones. I parked across the street, pulled up the hood of my dark coat, and waited. 10 minutes later, I was inside, seated at the bar with a clear line of sight to a secluded booth in the back. I ordered a tonic water and gripped the glass until my knuckles turned white. He was there, and so was she. Seeing the woman from the photograph in 3 dimensions was a visceral shock. She was younger than me, perhaps 28 or 29, with razor-sharp cheekbones and the kind of aggressive confidence that screamed corporate ambition. They were not touching. This was not a romantic tryst. It was a war council. I angled my phone, pretending to check my emails, and started recording. The lens captured every gesture. Andrew looked haggard, rubbing his temples, while the woman leaned in, her expression intense and commanding. She was doing most of the talking. When they stood up to leave, I threw cash on the bar and slipped out the side exit, sprinting around the block to the parking garage. I knew Andrew's habits. He never used valet if he could avoid it. He hated letting strangers drive his car. The garage was a concrete echo chamber, smelling of gasoline and damp dust. I heard their footsteps before I saw them. I crouched behind a concrete pillar near his car, pressing the record button on my phone again. The silence of the garage amplified their voices. "You are panicking." "Andrew," the woman said. Her voice was cool, stripped of any empathy. "You need to pull it together. If you crack, everything falls apart." "She knows something," Andrew hissed. I had never heard him sound so desperate. "The way she looks at me—" "It is not right. She is too quiet. I think she found the account statement. She found nothing." The woman snapped. "You are projecting. Jenna is a risk analyst, not a detective. She is probably just sad that her marriage is dying. Let her be sad. It makes the narrative better for us later." I held my breath, my hand trembling slightly. "I don't know." "Grace?" Andrew said. "I don't like it." Grace. The name landed in my mind like a heavy weight. Grace Lawton. I recalled seeing her name on a list of junior associates at a rival firm, but more importantly, Riley had flagged a G. Lawton as the signatory on the offshore shell company documents just this morning. Grace laughed, a low, cruel sound. She opened her purse and pulled out a key fob. "Listen to me," she said, stepping closer to him. "The transfers are complete. The policy is active. By this weekend, she will not be a problem anymore. We just need to stick to the plan. Saturday night, when you are at the gala, the accident happens. You have an ironclad alibi. I have the paperwork ready to file Monday morning." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The accident. They were not just talking about divorce. They were talking about a staged event, a permanent removal. My blood ran cold. I leaned forward instinctively to catch the rest of her sentence, but the heel of my boot caught on a loose piece of gravel. It skittered across the concrete floor with a sound that cracked like a gunshot in the quiet garage. Both of them froze. "What was that?" Grace demanded, her voice whipping toward my hiding spot. I pressed my back against the cold pillar, squeezing my eyes shut. "Is someone there?" Andrew called out. His voice was shaky, terrified. I heard the click of heels coming toward me. "Hello," Grace called out, her tone sharpening. Who is back there?" I had seconds. I looked around. There was a stairwell door 10 feet away. If I moved now, they would see me. If I stayed, they would find me. A car engine roared to life on the level above us, the headlights sweeping down the ramp. The sudden glare illuminated the garage for a split second, blinding them. I took the chance. I bolted. I kept my body low, using the line of parked cars as a shield, and slipped through the heavy metal door of the stairwell just as I heard Grace shout, "Hey you!" I did not look back. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my lungs burning, the recording on my phone burning a hole in my pocket. I burst out onto the street level and merged into the crowd of late-night pedestrians, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I made it to my rental car and locked the doors, my hands shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. I drove for 20 minutes in the wrong direction just to make sure I wasn't being followed. As the adrenaline began to fade, a cold, hard realization settled in its place. Grace Lawton was not just sleeping with my husband. She was the architect of his corruption. She was the one pulling the strings on the money laundering, and she was the one scripting my death. Andrew was weak, but Grace was a predator. And now she knew there was prey in the shadows. The glow of Riley's monitors was the only light in the room, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls of her apartment. It was 3 a.m. I had not slept in 24 hours. but the adrenaline coursing through my veins kept me terrifyingly alert. Riley sat hunched over the keyboard, her fingers flying, until she finally hit the enter key with a heavy, final thud. "I'm in," she whispered, her voice trembling. I bypassed Grace's firewall. "Jenna, you need to see this." I pulled a chair next to her. The screen was filled with rows of financial spreadsheets and email threads. Riley opened a folder titled Everland. Ledger. My eyes scanned the columns, and the breath left my lungs. Andrew was not working alone. The names listed alongside his as authorized signatories for the shell company were not strangers. They were board members of Westridge Dynamics, the chief financial officer, the head of operations, my own boss. Everland Consulting was not just a side hustle for a corrupt lawyer. It was a massive laundering operation designed to siphon company profits into offshore accounts. And Andrew was the legal architect keeping the whole structure from collapsing. "It gets worse," Riley said. She clicked on a subfolder named Liability Control. Inside was a document titled Narrative Draft. I began to read, and a cold sweat broke out across my skin. It was a script, a detailed step-by-step plan on what to do if the laundering scheme was ever flagged by federal investigators. Step 1. Deny knowledge. Step 2. Attribute financial irregularities to internal data manipulation. Step 3. Identify scapegoat. The name typed next to scapegoat was Jenna Marlowe. "They are going to frame you," Riley said, turning to look at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Since you are a risk analyst, they are going to claim you manipulated the risk models to cover up their theft. They want to pin the whole thing on you." "Keep scrolling," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. Riley scrolled down. There was a media strategy attached. It outlined a campaign to paint me as mentally unstable, a woman cracking under the pressure of her job and a failing marriage. Then came the photos. I stared in horror at images of myself I did not know existed. Me, asleep on the couch with a bottle of wine on the table, a bottle Andrew had opened. Not me. Me, crying in the garden after my mother's funeral, looking disheveled and hysterical. Me, shouting at a contractor who had broken a window. Taken out of context, I looked deranged. I looked like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. "And this," Riley said, hovering the mouse over a video file. "Jenna, don't watch this. Play it." I commanded. It was footage from our holiday party last year. I remembered that night. I had tripped over the rug and dropped a tray of appetizers. Andrew had helped me up, laughing. But on the screen, the clip had been surgically altered. The frames where I tripped were cut. The audio was distorted. It looked like I had deliberately thrown the tray at Andrew in a fit of rage. It looked like domestic abuse. "They are not just trying to steal your money, Jenna," Riley said softly. "They are trying to put you in prison or a psychiatric ward. They want to destroy your credibility so that if you ever speak up, no one will believe you." I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights of Dunhaven blinked indifferently below. For years, I had built my life on logic, on risk assessment, on playing by the rules. Andrew and Grace had used that against me. They had weaponized my trust and turned my life into a loaded gun pointed at my own head. But they had made a critical error. They assumed I would break. They assumed I would crumble under the weight of the shame they were manufacturing. "Copy everything," I told Riley. "Every email, every photo, every draft. I want it all on 3 separate hard drives. What are you going to do? I am going to rewrite their ending." The next morning, I met Maya Sterling in her office. The sun was streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I placed the hard drive on her mahogany desk. Maya plugged it in and spent 20 minutes reading in silence. When she finally looked up, her expression was grave. "This is nuclear, Jenna," she said. "If we release this, You are not just taking down your husband. You are taking down the entire executive board of Westridge Dynamics. The stock will plummet. The company might collapse. You will be a whistleblower in one of the biggest corporate scandals of the decade." She took off her glasses and leaned forward. "I have to warn you," Maya said, her voice dropping to a serious, warning tone. "If you go down this road, there is no going back to your old life. You will be scrutinized. You will be attacked. There is no turning back from this." I looked at the hard drive. I thought about the roses with no card. I thought about the spouse no longer cooperating note. I thought about the edited video of me looking like a monster. I looked Maya in the eye and smiled, a cold, sharp expression that felt entirely new on my face. "I don't need a way back," I said. "I am moving forward." The house was quiet when Andrew left at 6:30 in the evening. He had checked on me in the bedroom before he walked out the door, finding me curled under the duvet with the lights off. I had feigned the deep, rhythmic breathing of a woman sedated by sleeping pills. He had smoothed his tuxedo jacket, checked his reflection in the hallway mirror one last time, and left to claim the life he thought he had successfully stolen. Tonight was the Westridge Dynamics annual gala. It was the night the board would announce the new chief executive officer. Andrew had been working toward this for 5 years, and with Grace Lawton whispering in the ears of the right shareholders, he believed the position was already his. The moment the front door clicked shut, I threw off the covers. The time for mourning was over. The time for execution had arrived. I sat at my desk and opened the secure browser Riley had installed. I attached the folder labeled The Truth. It contained everything: the photos from the hotel, the recordings from the parking garage, the Everland Consulting ledgers, and the drafted script of my own staged mental breakdown. I entered 3 email addresses, one to Maya Sterling, one to Riley, and one to the encrypted inbox of the Department of Justice's Financial Crimes Division. I pressed send. My phone buzzed immediately. It was a text from Riley. "I have bypassed the security on the ballroom's AV system. I have control of the main projector and the sound system. Just give me the signal." I walked to the closet. I pushed aside the soft pastels and sensible cardigans Andrew liked me to wear. In the back, still in its garment bag, was a dress I had bought 3 years ago and never worn. It was black silk, floor-length, with a sharp architectural neckline that looked less like clothing and more like armor. I put it on. I painted my lips a dark crimson. I did not recognize the woman in the mirror, and that was the point. The Jenna Marlowe who cried over a bouquet of flowers was gone. I picked up my clutch. Inside, I placed a USB drive, the physical backup, and my phone. I had everything I needed to burn his world to the ground. The ballroom at the downtown Grand Hotel was a sea of expensive tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of champagne and ambition. I walked past the security check, flashing my spouse ID. They let me through without a second glance, assuming I was there to stand dutifully by my husband's side. I spotted them near the center of the room. Andrew was holding court with the chairman of the board, laughing at a joke that probably wasn't funny. Grace was standing just behind him, dressed in shimmering gold, playing the role of the supportive junior executive perfectly. She looked triumphant. She looked untouchable. I took a breath, letting the cold rage settle into my bones, and began to walk toward them. The crowd parted as I moved. People turned to stare. I was supposed to be at home, sick and unstable. Instead, I was walking with a precision that cut through the noise of the party. I stopped 3 feet away from them. Andrew turned, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. His smile froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure. Grace choked on her champagne, her eyes widening in genuine horror. Jenna Andrew stammered, his voice pitching up. "What? What are you doing here? You are supposed to be in bed." "I felt better," I said, my voice smooth and loud enough for the chairman to hear. "I couldn't miss your big night." "Andrew, I know how hard you have worked for this." Grace stepped forward, her hand reaching out as if to physically herd me away. Her nails dug into my arm, hidden by the fabric of my dress. "Jenna," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You are making a scene. You are clearly not well. Let's go find a quiet room where you can sit down." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up into her eyes. I did not pull away. I just stared at her until she flinched and let go. "I am perfectly fine, Grace," I said. In fact, I have never been more clear-headed. Andrew stepped between us, forcing a terrified smile for the benefit of the chairman. He gripped my elbow, his fingers bruising. "Darling," he said through gritted teeth, "you are pale. You are not yourself. Come on. Let's get you to the car. I will take you home." He tried to pull me toward the exit. He thought he could still control the narrative. He thought he could drag me out into the dark and finish what he started. I planted my feet. I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Andrew," I said, and then I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had finally trapped its kill. "I want to stay for the presentation. I want to see you get exactly what you deserve. Congratulations on tonight, Andrew." He stared at me, confusion warring with panic in his eyes. He didn't understand. He thought I was wishing him luck. He had no idea that my congratulations were for the end of his life as he knew it. I reached into my clutch and touched the phone. I sent a single character to Riley. X. I looked up at the giant LED screen behind the stage. It was time. The chairman tapped the microphone, the feedback whining briefly before the room settled into a hushed reverence. He beamed at the crowd, raising his glass. "And now, the moment we have all been waiting for," he announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "It is my honor to introduce the future of Westridge Dynamics." Andrew squeezed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh with possessive pride. He stepped forward, ready to accept his crown. I did not step with him. Instead, I pressed the send button on my phone. The massive LED screen behind the stage flickered. The polished blue logo of Westridge Dynamics dissolved into static. A gasp rippled through the crowd as the image stabilized. It was not a graph of quarterly earnings. It was a photograph, blown up to 10 feet tall. It was Andrew and Grace in the hotel lobby, their faces clear, their intimacy undeniable. Andrew froze mid-step. Before he could even process the image, the screen shifted again. This time, it was a cascade of documents. The bank statements from Everland Consulting scrolled past, highlighting transfers of $50,000, $20,000, $10,000. Then came the emails between Andrew and the board members regarding the laundering scheme. Finally, the screen froze on a single document, the life insurance policy on my life, valued at $3 million, with the handwritten note spouse no longer cooperating. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air from the lungs of 300 of the city's most powerful people. Then, the audio cut in. My voice had been edited out, leaving only Grace's cold, distinct soprano booming through the surround sound system. Everything will be over by the end of the weekend, and she will no longer be a problem. The glass in Andrew's hand shattered on the floor. Pandemonium broke the silence. The legal director of Westridge was already on his phone, his face pale, shouting for security. The internal audit team, who I had anonymously tipped off an hour ago, burst through the side doors. Andrew spun around to face me. His face was a mask of pure terror. He looked at the screen, then back at me, his knees buckling until he was physically kneeling on the expensive carpet. "Jenna," he choked out, reaching for the hem of my dress. "Jenna, stop this. Please, I can explain. It is not what it looks like." I looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, Just the clinical satisfaction of a job completed. I leaned down until my lips were inches from his ear. "You should have sent a card with the flowers," I whispered. Across the room. Grace Lawton realized the game was over. She hiked up her gold gown and bolted toward the service exit, shoving a waiter aside. She made it 3 steps before the double doors swung open. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, blocking her path. She screamed as they grabbed her arms, the sound shrill and pathetic against the backdrop of the ruined gala. Andrew was hauled to his feet by a detective. He did not fight. He just stared at me, his eyes wide and hollow as the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The sound was sharp, final, and sweeter than any symphony. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on the screaming board members, the flashing cameras, and the wreckage of the life I used to think I wanted. I walked out of the hotel and into the cool night air. The street was ablaze with the red and blue strobes of police cruisers. The lights danced across the pavement, reflecting in the puddles. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that finally felt mine. The nightmare was over, but as I watched the police escort Andrew into the back of a squad car, I knew the truth. This was not the end. That was just the beginning. I said to the night, "Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Jenna's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners. Your support means the world to us,